Three, two, one.
Today, we'll be talking about the variety of mental health professions that require the minimum of a master's degree to practice, including CPC, CADCI, LCADC, CSW intern, LCSW, LMFT. Now, some of you watching are right about now about to rip out your hair because those are an awful lot of letters for what sounds like pretty much the same thing. They all help people with mental health issues. So, in order to help with the not hair ripping thing, my hope is that after I go through these letters with you, that they're going to seem a lot less intimidating and they're going to seem a lot less like just alphabet soup and a lot more like just different professionals that work together in different ways. Also, to be clear, this will be coming from my perspective as a mental health provider in the state of Nevada. Each and every state has their own regulatory board for each mental health profession. Okay, and just to lend to the structure of the video, we're also going to narrow it down to 3 specific areas today. We're going to talk about licensure, we're going to talk about the types of positions and the treatment focus of each of these mental health professions, and we're also going to talk about their unique scope of practice. So to help break down all of these different letters, we're going to start by separating them by 2 big groups. The first one is going to be the one we'll talk about today. It'll be about all of the mental health professionals that are at a master's level, which means they have a master's degree. The main thing to think about when you think of a master's level mental health provider is they use therapeutic techniques in order to treat mental health issues. They also have a different position depending on what their treatment setting is. So just for example, maybe they would work at a VA. That would be a completely different sort of role that they would have as compared to working at a hospital or working at a community health center or working at a school. It all just depends on whatever their role demands of them in that particular treatment setting. The reason I wanted to speak about those 2 professions together is because they are regulated by the same board here in Nevada, and that was fairly recent. I couldn't tell you exactly when, but it was a fairly recent decision I'm aware of. So a clinical professional counselor and a licensed marriage family therapist both more or less see the same people. They both see individuals, couples, groups, families. Sometimes, depending on the board again, they may need additional training just depending on what their discretion is. But more or less, they treat the same issues and they see the same people. The biggest difference between those 2 professions is licensed marriage and family therapists have a particular focus and training on interpersonal relations. So you see a lot more of them working with family issues and couples issues. Those are kind of like their bread and butter. As far as scope of practice goes, the biggest thing that stands out for me is that they are not able to treat psychotic disorders. And that could be a whole other topic for another video, but the main key word in there is psychotic disorders. They are not actually trained, it's not in their scope of practice to be able to treat something like schizophrenia, delusional disorder. Okay, so number 2, licensed clinical social worker or CSW intern. Okay, so licensed clinical social worker is what I will eventually be, probably by the start of next year. I'm almost done with my clinical internship. That's a whole other video that I could do about what that process is like and what the difference between those 2 licenses are. We'll not really get into that. It's not really what this video is about. But I am a CSW intern. As a clinical social work intern, or as a licensed clinical social worker for that matter, I can work at, say, somewhere like the VA, I can work for the federal government, I can work at a community health center, I can work in a hospital. The list goes on and on as far as places that I can work as a licensed clinical social worker, which is primarily the reason that I decided it would be a good fit for me to begin with, just because I didn't want to be pegged in one thing or another. Like if I decided I was tired of working with individual or even group and family therapy, I would like to do something else. There are so many things that I can do with just a master's in social work, and plus the licensed clinical social work part of it will just be like the icing on the cake. And then as far as scope goes, the big thing that stands out for licensed clinical social workers is that we can treat psychotic disorders like schizophrenia, delusional disorder, and on and on and on. So that is the big distinction. Oh, and one more. The licensed clinical social workers, of course, have social work in it. So we are trained to provide advocacy and case management as we are social workers before we are finished with our clinical license. And the very last one we're going to talk about today are Licensed Clinical Alcohol and Drug Counselor, LCADC, or Certified Alcohol Drug Counselor, CADC. The big difference just between those two right there is basically the degree that you have. Either you have a bachelor's for a certified alcohol and drug counselor, if I can talk today, and then if you have a master's, then you can get a licensed clinical alcohol and drug counselor credential. You would look for someone who has an LCADC if you were looking for someone who has knowledge or training or experience specifically for treating substance abuse disorders. That is the big thing with LCADCs, or just getting dual licensed in general for people who are maybe like CPC and or MFT. They also want to treat substance issues. They have that additional credential so that it's widening their scope. Just a couple of different examples of what a LCADC or a CADC could do. They could serve as a substance abuse counselor, most obvious, and they can work in probably just a variety of different roles in different inpatient or outpatient facilities for substance abuse treatment. So that about covers it. Thank you guys so much for watching. See you next week. Did you like what you just saw? Make sure you like and subscribe. New videos come out every Tuesday.